By 1980, the American muscle car was no longer king of the road. It was an endangered species. The era of aggressive horsepower battles and screaming V8s had ended with a whimper. New emissions regulations, the oil crisis hangover, and rising insurance costs buried the muscle car dream. Some nameplates that once ruled the streets disappeared entirely, while others were neutered beyond recognition. These 9 so-called super muscle cars still wore performance badges, but their reputations were already in the rearview mirror.
Dear viewer, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for your support.
Few names in muscle car history stir nostalgia quite like the Roadrunner. Born in 1968 as a raw, no-frills street machine with big power and a budget price, the original Roadrunner embodied everything right about the golden era of American muscle cars. Fast forward to 1980, and the Plymouth Volare Roadrunner bore little resemblance to its fire-breathing predecessors. Based on the compact, emissions-choked Volare platform, this version of the Roadrunner was a brand-damaging afterthought, the swan song for a nameplate that once stood for high-octane rebellion. The Roadrunner rose to fame in the late 1960s as a performance bargain. Powered by 383 and 426 Hemi V8s, designed for straight-line speed (IT), marketed with cartoon character tie-ins and muscle car bravado (ITCA). Emissions regulations (IT), rising insurance costs, rising fuel crises, corporate downsizing mandates (ITC). Until this under by the time the F-body Volare became the base for the Roadrunner in 1976, the muscle car era was all but dead. By 1980, what remained was a badge-engineered husk, .2, platform and design from brawn to bland. The 1980 Volare Roadrunner was built on Chrysler's F-body platform, shared with the Dodge Aspen. It was intended as a compact alternative to bloated intermediate cars, but even as a compact, the design felt dated by 1980. Standard Volare coupe body with stripe package .2, Roadrunner graphics and decals, often with a cartoon bird still included .2, rally wheels and blackout trim .2, optional T-tops TC. Despite the dress-up, the design was boxy, bland, and outdated, especially next to modernizing imports and aerodynamic domestic cars like the Ford Fairmont or GM's upcoming X-bodies. 3. Powertrain, weak engines, weaker reputation. Here's where things truly fell apart. The 1980 Volare Roadrunner offered a few engine options, none worthy of the name. 225 cu inches, 3.7-liter slant 6 BU, 90 horsepower, utterly inadequate for any vehicle claiming performance credentials. These 318 cu and V8s output 122, 130 horsepower, the most common option but heavily restricted by emissions gear, 3 cu in V8 optional, 1 Crippa 160 horsepower. These the most powerful engine offered but not standard. Performance calls in 10.5 seconds. None of these options even remotely approach the power of earlier Roadrunners, and most were paired with 3-speed automatic transmissions, sapping any remaining fun. While Chrysler tried to promote the Roadrunner as a sporty option, it was saddled with soft suspension tuning, heavy steering, rear leaf springs, weak drum brakes on the rear. Despite some cosmetic handling upgrades like sway bars and wider tires, the car drove like any other Volare, floaty, unrefined, and underwhelming. Enthusiasts expecting muscle were met with malaise. Inside, the Roadrunner was just a Volare with some added trim. Flat vinyl or cloth bench or optional bucket seats, the interior felt cheap and uninspired, especially when compared to newer rivals like the Toyota Celica or even the Mustang Ghia. Despite optional sporty details, it couldn't hide its economy car roots. The Volare line became infamous for rust issues, often within the first few years of ownership, fit and finish problems, misaligned panels, rattles, and trim falling off, recalls, and poor reliability. Chrysler's financial instability, which led to inconsistent assembly standards. The Roadrunner variant suffered all the same issues. In short, it didn't just underperform, it fell apart while doing so. Plymouth tried to tap into Roadrunner nostalgia, but the performance world had moved on. Car magazines gave it lukewarm to negative reviews. Buyers knew it wasn't a real muscle car. Even loyal Mopar fans were disappointed. With no advertising muscle and no performance credibility, the 1980 Roadrunner faded into obscurity almost immediately after it left showrooms. The 1980 model marked the final year for the Roadrunner nameplate. It was a quiet and sad exit for a car that had once been a dominant force in the muscle car world. No Roadrunner was produced after 1980. By the time the performance scene picked up again in the late 80s, the name was forgotten. Unlike the Charger or Challenger, the Roadrunner has not been revived in any meaningful way. Today, the Volare Roadrunner is remembered, if at all, as a low point in the muscle car's decline, a cautionary tale of stretching a name too far beyond its roots. The 1980 Plymouth Volare Roadrunner stands as a textbook example of how a legendary nameplate can be tarnished by poor planning, weak engineering, and badge overuse. Stripped of its muscle, saddled with emissions-choked engines, and based on a compromised platform, the final Roadrunner was little more than a marketing exercise, and buyers knew it. It wasn't a performance car, it wasn't a luxury car, it wasn't reliable. It was, simply put, a forgotten product of the malaise era trying to wear the mask of something greater. The initials AMX once carried serious weight in the world of American performance cars. Introduced in 1968 as a two-seat rival to the Corvette and Mustang, AMC's original AMX packed V8 muscle into a compact, aggressive frame. But by 1980, both the market and AMC had changed dramatically. In an effort to revive the nameplate, AMC grafted the AMX badge onto its small Spirit hatchback, hoping for a resurgence of performance credibility. What resulted was a car with bold looks, but little muscle, a symbol of a brand and an era struggling to survive. Let's dive into the story of the 1980 AMC Spirit AMX, a last gasp from America's underdog automaker. By the late 1970s, American Motors Corporation, AMC, was in a difficult position. It lacked the resources of the Big Three. The muscle car market was dead. Fuel economy and emissions ruled the day. AMC's most successful products were the Gremlin, Pacer, and Hornet, quirky economy cars. In 1979, AMC revived the Spirit nameplate as a replacement for the Gremlin. To boost excitement, it resurrected the AMX badge for a performance version of the Spirit hatchback. But despite its historic name, this AMX had more style than substance. 2. Styling and design, aggression on a budget. The 1980 AMC Spirit AMX was available only as a liftback hatchback coupe, and it certainly looked the part of a performance car. Flared wheel arches, blacked-out trim and grille, bold AMX decals and striping, unique aluminum 14-inch turbo-cast wheels, option T-tops and blackout hood treatment, hood scoop, non-functional. It was undeniably eye-catching, one of the flashiest compacts of its time, and AMC leaned heavily on the nostalgia of the AMX name. However, while the bodywork shouted performance, the mechanicals whispered compromise. The 1980 AMX was available with a few engine options, but none lived up to the muscle legacy. Base engine, 258 cu and 4.2 liters inline-six. Operation, a 110 horsepower, durable but sluggish. Optionally BV8, 304 cu in 5.0-liter AMC B8. Open, 125 horsepower, paired with either a 3-speed automatic or 4-speed manual. This V8 was emissions-choked, and a far cry from the 390 and 401 monsters that had powered earlier AMXs. Performance was mild, 0 to 60 miles per hour, 10.5 to 11 seconds, quarter mile, 17 to 18 seconds. In the muscle car world, those numbers were laughable, especially when compared to even the Buick Grand National just a few years later. While it lacks serious power, the 1980 Spirit AMX handled better than expected. Front and rear sway bars, stiffer springs and shocks than base Spirit models. A relatively short wheelbase gave it a nimble feel. Steering was precise by domestic standards. On tight back roads or autocross courses, the Spirit AMX was stuck in an awkward position. Too slow to be a real muscle car, too crude to challenge nimble imports like the Toyota Celica or Volkswagen Scirocco. Overshadowed by domestic siblings like the Mustang Cobra, Camaro Z28, and Buick Regal Sport Coupe. At a time when turbocharging was just beginning to re-energize American performance, the AMX felt like yesterday's car dressed up in modern drag. 7. Sales and rarity. AMC sold fewer than 10,000 Spirit AMX units in 1980. Buyers were unconvinced. The styling overpromised, the performance underdelivered. AMC's brand reputation was already in decline. By 1981, the AMX was discontinued altogether. The Spirit line continued for a few more years before AMC shifted focus to Jeeps and partnerships with Renault. Today, the 1980 AMC Spirit AMX is rare, but not highly valued. A curiosity among muscle car historians, occasionally restored or hot-rodded by AMC enthusiasts. Seen as one of the last true AMC performance cars before the company dissolved into Chrysler. Despite its flaws, it's remembered fondly by fans for trying to keep the AMX name alive, trying to offer style and fun during a bleak automotive decade. The 1980 AMC Spirit AMX was a bold costume draped over a modest machine. With sporty styling, a historic name, and a rebellious attitude, it looked ready to tear up the streets, but its outdated engineering and emissions-choked engine made sure it never left a mark. It was AMC's last attempt at building a true performance coupe before being swallowed by the industry it had spent decades fighting. And while it failed to live up to its name, the Spirit AMX still symbolizes AMC's scrappy determination to stay in the game. It may not have run fast, but it went down swinging. By 1981, the American performance car was in deep decline. The muscle car era had ended in a haze of emissions regulations, rising insurance premiums, and fuel economy mandates. Yet some nameplates like the Pontiac Grand Prix still carried the faint aroma of power and prestige. The 1981 Grand Prix LJ, the luxury J trim, was Pontiac's attempt to blend V8 performance with personal luxury styling. But in reality, it was too heavy, too underpowered, and too plush to live up to either half of that promise. While the name Grand Prix once stood for racing-inspired excitement, the 1981 LJ was more boulevard cruiser than backroad burner. The 1981 Grand Prix rode on GM's G-body platform, which traced its roots to the late 1970s A-body. Though slightly downsized compared to its 1970s predecessors, it still carried the long hood, short deck coupe proportions of an earlier age. The LJ trim was the most luxury-oriented version of the Grand Prix lineup. Its design was marked by opera windows and vinyl landau roof, creme-tinted grille with vertically stacked quad headlights, padded rear roof section and extra body trim, UNLJ badging, plush interior appointments. While it looked upscale, it also looked dated, especially next to more aerodynamic vehicles like the upcoming 1982 Ford Thunderbird or even smaller, sportier coupes like the Datsun 280ZX. Despite carrying the traditional rear-wheel drive V8 coupe formula, the 1981 Grand Prix LJ's powertrains were a far cry from its muscle car forebears. Engine options: 231 CUN 3.8-liter Buick V6 base engine, 110 horsepower, adequate for economy but not performance. 265 CUN 4.3 LED Pontiac V8 optional Optate, 120 horsepower. 301 CUN 4.9 LED Pontiac V8 optional outputs, 140 horsepower at best. All these engines were choked by EGR systems, catalytic converters, lean burn carburetors, low compression ratios. Even the best-performing 301 V8 was barely enough to move the Grand Prix's 3,600-pound curb weight with any enthusiasm. The car may have had a V8 badge, but the muscle was missing. The standard transmission for V8 models was a 3-speed turbo-hydromatic automatic with no manual option offered. This further dulled any sporting intent, delivering a smooth but uninspired driving experience. Suspension was tuned for comfort, not agility. Soft spring rates, body lean in corners, minimal road feedback, rear solid axle on coil springs. Even with optional rally suspension or radial tuned shocks, the car handled like a couch on wheels, perfect for straight-line cruising, but out of place on winding roads. By 1981, the Grand Prix faced increasing competition. Mustangs and Camaros, lighter, faster, more useful. Imports like the Toyota Supra or Datsun 280ZX, modern and sporty. Ford Thunderbird and Chevy Monte Carlo offered more aerodynamic redesigns. The Grand Prix LJ sat awkwardly in the middle, offering neither the excitement of a sports coupe nor the full elegance of a luxury car. Sales were steady but unremarkable. The aging body style would be replaced in 1982 by a completely restyled, more modern version of the Grand Prix, one that better embraced the aerodynamic look of the decade. Today, the 1981 Grand Prix LJ is rarely seen at car shows or remembered in enthusiast circles. It suffers from no racing pedigree, no standout performance version, no collector value. It is often overshadowed by the Trans Am, which continued to carry the Pontiac performance banner, the later Grand Prix GTPs of the 1990s and 2000s, and the more iconic 1960s and 70s Grand Prix, which had bolder styling and available 400-plus horsepower engines. Still, it serves as a snapshot of early 1980s malaise, a time when muscle was memory and automakers were unsure how to move forward. The 1981 Pontiac Grand Prix LJ was an attractive, comfortable coupe that promised more than it delivered. While it wore the V8 badge and sported luxury performance branding, it lacked the muscle, speed, or modernity to justify either reputation. Instead, it became part of the long, slow fade of Pontiac's performance legacy during the early 80s, a time when cars looked fast but drove slow, and when even the most evocative names couldn't outrun the reality of emissions-era engineering. A forgotten placeholder between Pontiac's golden years and its final act. When we talk about the decline of muscle cars in the 1980s, much of the conversation revolves around emissions regulations, corporate downsizing, and the awkward transition from raw V8 power to smaller, more efficient drivetrains. In the US, models like the Chevrolet Malibu became boxy, subdued family cars, stripped of their late 60s and early 70s fire. But in Mexico, things took a different turn. There, Chevrolet offered an exclusive version of the Malibu that Americans never got to drive. The 1983 Chevrolet Malibu SS. Sporting V8 power, aggressive looks, and a nostalgic nameplate, this car existed as a ghost muscle car, a relic of American power tuned for a different audience in a different market. 1. Background: GM's export strategy and the Mexican market. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, General Motors de Mexico operated with relative autonomy. While the U.S. lineup was adjusting to corporate fuel efficiency mandates and emissions constraints, the Mexican market still allowed for simpler, more powerful configurations and more freedom in resurrecting past nameplates. In the U.S., the Malibu had been relegated to taxi duty and middle-of-the-road sedan life. But in Mexico, the Malibu retained its coupe form and was reborn as a performance-oriented model, the Malibu SS. This wasn't just a badge job. It was a rare case of the muscle spirit surviving offshore. 2. Design and styling. Subtle but menacing. Visually, the 1983 Malibu SS retained the familiar G-body coupe layout shared with the American Malibu. But several cues marked it as something special. SS badging on the grille and trunk, blacked-out trim in place of chrome, hood scoop and sport stripes in some versions, unique wheels or rally-style hubcaps, optionally front air dam and rear spoiler, dealer installed. Compared to the boxy, anonymous sedans roaming U.S. streets, this Malibu looked muscular and aggressive, like a throwback to the Chevelle SS days, a smart way to evoke nostalgia without reinventing the car. Unlike its U.S. counterpart, which by 1983 was mostly seen with 229 CU and V6s, or the underpowered 267 V8, the Mexican Malibu SS got what enthusiasts wanted: standard or optional, depending on trim, 350 CU in 5.7 small block V8. Out, a Trolla 180 to 200 horsepower, varied depending on tuning and carburation, 4-speed manual or 3-speed automatic transmission. This made the Mexican SS one of the last G-body cars to receive a genuine 350 V8 at a time when GM was phasing it out of U.S. cars due to emissions regulations. It wasn't a drag strip demon, but it could hit 0-60 in about 8 seconds, a respectable number for its era, and a thrill compared to the anemic American Malibu base models. Inside, the Malibu SS didn't get radical changes but had some touches that hinted at its sporting intentions. Bucket seats in many models, 4-spoke sport steering wheel, SS interior badging and trim accents, Akamator and rally gauge cluster. It remained fairly austere by today's standards. No high-end materials or fancy digital dashboards, but it felt focused, which was more than you could say about the average Malibu sedan. Number 6, why America didn't get it. The most puzzling part of the 1983 Malibu SS story is why it never came to the US. Despite sharing parts and engineering with American models, it stayed south of the border. Reasons included US emissions laws. The 350 V8 didn't meet federal requirements for passenger cars anymore. Corporate priorities. GM in America was pushing newer models like the Camaro Z28 and Monte Carlo SS for performance customers. Malibu's image. In the US, the Malibu name had already drifted into family sedan territory. A performance variant would have required a full rebranding effort. So while American buyers got the Malibu Classic, diesel V8s and V6 powered grocery getters, Mexican enthusiasts got the last true V8 Malibu coupe. Today, the 1983 Malibu SS is extremely rare, even in Mexico. Sought after by collectors who admire oddball muscle history. Occasionally imported to the US by dedicated fans. A reminder of how muscle culture survived quietly in foreign markets. It occupies a unique place in automotive history. Not just an export model, but a performance ghost, almost entirely unknown in its country of origin. The 1983 Chevrolet Malibu SS Mexico represents a strange and fascinating chapter in GM history, a time when American muscle design lived on quietly just across the border. With its V8 heart, throwback styling, and muscle-era name, it was everything enthusiasts wanted in the early 80s, just not in the country where muscle cars were born. Overshadowed by GM's domestic priorities and restrained by US regulations, the Malibu SS became a phantom of performance past, a muscle car that never got its moment on American roads. And today, it's remembered not for what it did, but for where it could have been. In the pantheon of American muscle cars, few names carry the same performance nostalgia as Hurst Olds. From the original 1968 models with 455 cubic inch V8s and trick shifters to the brute force machines of the early 70s, Hurst-badged Oldsmobiles were iconic street machines. By 1983, Oldsmobile tried to tap into that heritage once again with the release of the Cutlass Calice Hurst Olds, built to celebrate the 15th anniversary of the original Hurst Olds. The car had the looks, the badging, and the marketing pedigree, but under the hood, it was powered by a sluggish 307 cubic inch V8 and saddled with emissions equipment and a heavy curb weight. The result? A muscle car in image only, a gold-trimmed shadow of its former self. The 1983 Hurst Olds was not just a styling exercise, it was a limited edition revival, backed by Oldsmobile and the Hurst Performance brand. The goal was to celebrate the original 1968 model and reignite some muscle car magic in the downsized, smog-era 1980s. Built on the G-body Cutlass Calice platform, it featured unique visual upgrades, special badging, and a version of the Hurst dual gate shifter. But instead of tire-melting performance, the car offered something far tamer. 2. Exterior styling, flashy, bold, and retro cool. If there's one thing the 1983 Hurst Olds got right, it was styling. It stood out dramatically from the sea of gray sedans on American roads. Key features included two-tone black and silver paint scheme with gold stripes, Hurst Olds badging on fenders and deck lid, color-matched sport mirrors, cloud rally wheels with Goodyear Eagle GT tires, optional power bulge fibergraph, rear deck lid spoiler. It looked the part of a muscle machine. Parked next to a contemporary Monte Carlo or Regal, it screamed nostalgia and aggression. While earlier Hurst Olds models roared with 455 cubic inches of high-compression fury, the 1983 version was limited to a much more mundane setup. 307 cubic inch, 5.0-liter Oldsmobile V8. Owed 180 horsepower and 245 pounds-feet of torque. 4-barrel carburetor, 8.5-to-1 compression. Mated to a 4-speed automatic transmission. That might not sound bad in context, but the reality was disappointing. The G-body Cutlass weighed nearly 3,600 pounds, and the 307 was tuned more for smoothness than speed. Performance estimates? 0-60 miles per hour, Palace in 9.5 to 10 seconds. Quarter mile, Palace is 17 seconds. That meant the 1983 Hurst Olds could be outrun by many imports and even some economy cars of the era. For a car wearing performance credentials, it just didn't deliver the muscle. One of the most celebrated features of the Hurst Olds was its lightning rod shifter system, a modern twist on the classic Hurst dual weight features. Triple lever automatic shifter setup, one lever for normal automatic function, others for manual gear selection, first, second drive. Gimmicky but fun, and visually striking. This gave the car a bit of retro cool drama and stood as a unique selling point, something no other car on the market offered at the time. It was the showpiece of the interior. 5. Interior, sport luxury feel with some flash. The Hurst Olds featured a Cutlass Calais interior with sporty upgrades. Unique silver and black cloth bucket seats with Hurst embroidery, center console with the triple shifter, special 15th anniversary dash plaque, tilt steering, rally gauges and tachometer, air conditioning, power windows and premium stereo as options. The interior was a solid blend of luxury and muscle cues, though build quality and materials were still typical GM of the era, serviceable but not premium. 6. Suspension and driving feel, soft and easygoing. Despite its image, the Hurst Olds drove like a luxury coupe. Standard G-body coil spring suspension, soft shocks and underwhelming cornering grip, power steering with vague feel, power brakes with front discs, rear drums. It was comfortable, but not engaging. The driving experience didn't match the aggressive looks. It was best suited to boulevard cruising, not back road brawling. 7. Reception and market impact. Despite its lack of muscle, the 1983 Hurst Olds sold relatively well for a limited production nostalgia model. 3,001 units were produced. Enthusiasts loved the look and heritage. It was well received by GM loyalists and collectors. Oldsmobile followed up with a nearly identical 1984 model, 3,500 units produced, and then passed the performance torch to the 1985-1987 442 models, which still use the 307 V8, but with minor tweaks. The 1983 Hurst Olds occupies an awkward but fascinating space in muscle car history. It revived a legend, but couldn't replicate its performance. It gave us one of the wildest shifters ever seen in a production car. It was a styling success and an enthusiast favorite, even if it wasn't fast. Today, it's appreciated as a classic 80s tribute car, not a true performance coupe. Prices for clean examples have risen thanks to its rarity and unique flair, but its driving experience remains underwhelming by muscle standards. The 1983 Oldsmobile Cutlass Calais Hurst Olds was all flash and little fire, a golden reminder of what muscle once was, not what it still could be. With its bold stripes, lightning rod shifter, and retro vibe, it turned heads wherever it went. But when it came time to back up its bark with bite, it fell short. Still, it deserves respect as one of the few efforts in the early 1980s to keep the muscle car image alive, even if only in spirit. For fans of GM oddities and performance nostalgia, it remains. By 1984, the Chevrolet El Camino, once a bold answer to the Ford Ranchero, had become something of an oddball on American roads. Part car, part truck, it was nearing the end of its production run, and no longer the high-performance utility vehicle it once pretended to be. But GM wasn't quite ready to let it fade away quietly. That year, a unique version emerged, the El Camino SS by Choo Choo Customs. With a Monte Carlo SS-style front fascia, aggressive badging, and factory backing, this El Camino was meant to bring muscle flair back to the car-truck hybrid. And while it had the look, it lacked the bite, a factory-backed showpiece that promised more than it could deliver. Let's dive into the story of this rare and misunderstood El Camino SS variant. 1. Background: a car-truck hybrid in decline. The El Camino, introduced in 1959, had long played the dual role of utility hauler and muscle machine. Through the 1960s and early 1970s, V8-powered SS versions kept it relevant among muscle car fans. But by the 1980s, rising insurance costs, emissions standards, and shifting tastes left the El Camino as more of a curiosity than a competitor. By 1984, the El Camino was based on the aging G-body platform, and its future was uncertain. GM saw an opportunity to spice up the lineup and capitalize on the popularity of the new Monte Carlo SS Coupe, which had just debuted with sleek NASCAR-inspired styling. The solution? A styling collaboration with a small Chattanooga-based outfit called Choo Choo Customs. 2. Who was Choo Choo Customs? Choo Choo Customs Inc., based in Tennessee, specialized in modifying vehicles with custom body kits, interiors, and performance accessories, often for dealerships or niche buyers. In 1983, Choo Choo Customs signed a deal with GM to create a special El Camino SS appearance package, starting full production in 1984. This wasn't just a dealer option, it was factory sanctioned and carried an official SS designation, though performance upgrades were modest to non-existent. The 1984 El Camino SS Choo Choo was defined by its styling package, not mechanical upgrades. Key visual features included Monte Carlo SS-style front end, squared-off nose with aerodynamic cues, SS badging on the grille, tailgate, and doors, color-matched bumpers and mirrors, custom front air dam and side graphics, optional cowl induction-style hood, non-functional, rally or turbine-style wheels, available two-tone paint and stripes. The effect was dramatic. The Choo Choo El Camino SS looked like a factory hot rod, and next to a base El Camino, it screamed performance. But that aggression was mostly skin-deep. Despite the visual attitude, the 1984 El Camino SS by Choo Choo Customs was mechanically identical to standard El Caminos. Engine options 5 Aero 305 CUN, V8 most common. Output, around a 150 HP, 4-barrel carburetor 4.3 lead V available in base models, paired with a 3-speed or optional 4-speed automatic transmission. There was no true SS spec powertrain, no upgraded suspension, no performance exhaust or differential. For all its NASCAR-inspired style, this SS was all show, no go. Performance was sluggish, 0 to 60 miles an hour. Aero 11 seconds, quarter mile. Aero 17 plus seconds. In short, it couldn't back up its aggressive looks. A frustrating reality for buyers expecting a muscle truck experience. 5 Interior mild customization. Inside, the SS got a modest cosmetic upgrade. SS embroidery on seat backs or dash, optionally sports steering wheel, rally gauges, premium cloth or vinyl upholstery, center console with floor shifter in some builds. Overall, it was comfortable and well-equipped for the era, but not particularly sporty. Most of the budget clearly went into the exterior. Production numbers and rarity. The 1984 model year marked the first full production year for the Choo Choo SS package. It's estimated that fewer than 5,000 units were built in 1984, though exact numbers vary. Choo Choo continued to offer the SS conversion through 1987, the final year of El Camino production. Due to its limited availability and niche appeal, the El Camino SS Choo Choo remains rare, especially in clean original condition. 7. Market reception and legacy. When it was new, the Choo Choo SS received a mixed reception. Official SS branding, head-turning appeal, no real performance boost, premium price tag, lacked authenticity compared to classic SS models. Among performance enthusiasts, the Choo Choo SS was often dismissed as a muscle pretender. But today, it enjoys collector curiosity thanks to its rarity, quirky backstory, and over-the-top 1980s aesthetics. It's a favorite among El Camino fans who want something unique, and a symbol of how car makers in the 80s often used styling gimmicks to sell the illusion of power. The 1984 Chevrolet El Camino SS by Choo Choo Customs is a muscle car mirage, a truck that looked fast but wasn't. With Monte Carlo SS flair and factory-backed badges, it lured in buyers hungry for nostalgia and style. But under the skin, it was just another G-body hauler with average performance and a flashy makeover. Still, it deserves recognition as one of the more unusual factory collaborations of the 1980s. It shows how image sometimes mattered more than substance, and how GM tried, in its own roundabout way, to keep the muscle flame flickering during one of the industry's most underpowered decades. By the mid-1980s, the American pony car segment was deep into its second act. The Chevrolet Camaro and Pontiac Firebird had both been redesigned in 1982 to kick off the third generation of GM's F-body platform. Sleeker, more aerodynamic, and slightly more efficient, these cars represented a new direction for muscle-inspired coupes. At the top of the Firebird range sat the aggressive Trans Am, loaded with scoops, spoilers, and image. At the bottom, the base Firebird offered budget thrills. Caught awkwardly in between was the Pontiac Firebird SE, the special edition. But it wasn't particularly special. The 1986 Firebird SE offered buyers a refined version of the pony car experience, with slightly upgraded interiors and engine options, but little to make it truly stand out. Not sporty enough for enthusiasts, not plush enough for luxury fans, and visually mild compared to the Trans Am. The SE quickly became the forgotten stepchild of the Firebird family. 1. Positioning in the lineup, not quite this, not quite that. Pontiac's Firebird lineup in 1986 was base Firebird, entry-level, economy-oriented, Firebird SE, the comfort and civility option, Trans Am, performance-focused, aggressively styled flagship. The SE tried to straddle the line between luxury and sport. It was aimed at buyers who wanted more than the base model, but didn't want the wild personality or insurance premiums of the Trans Am. Unfortunately, this middle ground positioning made it feel directionless, too bland to be sporty, too stiff to be cushy. 2. Exterior design, mild to a fault. Visually, the SE was nearly indistinguishable from the base model, unless you knew what to look for. Key features: color-matched urethane front and rear fascias, flush-mounted halogen headlamps shared across trims, 15-inch cast aluminum wheels, optional, dual exhaust outlets, V8 models, minimal decals or graphics. The Trans Am's ground effects, spoilers, and hood scoops were absent. The SE looked competent, but in the image-driven 80s pony car market, competent wasn't enough. 3. Powertrain options, paper muscle. The SE was available with a variety of engines, but few were memorable. Available engines: 2.8L V6 LB8 by 135 horsepower, smooth but underwhelming. 5.8 LV8 LG4 by 150 horsepower, carbureted, decent torque, low revs. 5.L V8 LB9 tuned port injection, 190 horsepower, rare in SE trim. The only truly lively option. While these numbers weren't terrible for the time, they paled next to the Trans Am's optional 215 horsepower TPI V8, and the performance wasn't compelling. Most SE buyers got the V6 or LG4 V8, which meant 0-60 mile/hour times in the 9 to 10 second range, sluggish by performance coupe standards. Pontiac marketed the SC as the luxury-oriented Firebird, and that showed more clearly inside the cabin. Upgraded cloth or leather upholstery, full-gauge cluster with tachometer of generic digital dash, tilt steering, cruise control, power windows and locks, optionally T-tops and premium stereo. For its price, the interior was decently equipped, but shared many parts with the base model. Build quality was typical 1980s GM, meaning squeaks, rattles, and cheap plastic trim weren't uncommon. 6. Market reception, a trim in search of a buyer. The SE failed to find a strong identity in the market. Enthusiasts bought Trans Ams. Budget-conscious drivers bought the base Firebird. SC buyers were few and far between. It suffered from the same problem as many middle trims, not distinctive enough to generate excitement and too expensive to justify its mild upgrades over the base model. By the late 1980s, the SC trim was dropped altogether as Pontiac restructured the Firebird lineup to emphasize performance and value. 7. Legacy, forgotten and overlooked. Today, the 1986 Firebird SC is rare not because it was exclusive, but because no one saved them. Enthusiasts ignored them. Collectors passed them over. Even junkyards barely took notice. But the SC does offer an affordable entry into third-gen Firebird ownership, decent driving comfort with classic styling, a curious glimpse into Pontiac's mid-80s identity crisis. Its biggest flaw wasn't its engineering. It was its lack of character in an era when buyers wanted boldness. The 1986 Pontiac Firebird SE was a classic case of a car trying to be everything and ending up as nothing. Positioned between a sensible base coupe and the wild Trans Am, it tried to blend comfort with mild performance and succeeded only in fading into the background. While it wore the Firebird name proudly, it lacked the fire. In the muscle car comeback story of the 1980s, the SC was little more than a footnote, a competent, inoffensive coupe that never found its purpose. And like many middle children, it has since been forgotten, remembered only by those who stumbled upon one in a used car lot or under a dusty carport, wondering what it might have been if it had only picked a side. In the performance-starved years of the 1980s, Dodge was scrambling to reinvent itself. The muscle car era had long since ended, and the company found itself building compact front-wheel drive cars instead of rear-wheel drive V8 bruisers. But Dodge wasn't willing to give up on performance entirely, and neither was legendary tuner Carroll Shelby. Enter the 1987 Dodge Daytona Shelby Z, a car that promised turbocharged speed and sports coupe flair. Backed by Shelby branding and featuring real upgrades over the base Daytona, it seemed ready to bring excitement back to Chrysler showrooms. But despite its flashy name, body kit, and turbo boost, the Shelby Z couldn't quite live up to the Shelby legend and wound up being more about style than substance. 1. Background: the FWD performance gamble. The original Dodge Daytona, introduced in 1984, was Chrysler's front-wheel drive answer to sporty imports like the Toyota Celica and Nissan 200 SX. It was a sleek hatchback coupe built on the Chrysler G platform, derived from the K-car architecture, offering turbocharged four-cylinder power in place of traditional V8 muscle. By 1987, Dodge sought to reinvigorate the Daytona line with a sportier model, one carrying the magic of the Shelby name. While not built by Shelby himself, as some earlier models had been, the Shelby Z was developed with his input and intended as a top-tier factory performance model. 2. Exterior styling, sharp lines, and 80s aggression. Visually, the 1987 Daytona Shelby Z looked fast, even when standing still. Dodge loaded it up with the aerodynamic styling trends of the era. Flush headlights, a new feature for 1987, ground effects and aggressive side skirts, color-matched bumpers and trim, rear spoiler and Shelby Z badging, optionally T-top roof or sunroof, known 15-inch crab cast aluminum wheels. It had the aesthetic of a serious performance car, especially in deep red or black, with its low-slung profile and sporty stance. But the promise of speed was only partially delivered under the hood. 3. Powertrain: turbocharged but tempered. Underneath the fiberglass bodywork was a turbocharged four-cylinder, Chrysler's go-to performance engine of the time. Engine specs: 2.2-liter turbocharged SOHC inline-4 Turbo 2, output 174 horsepower and 200 pound-feet of torque, multi-point fuel injection, intercooled turbocharger, unlike earlier Turbo 1 models. Paired with either 5-speed manual Getrag transmission, preferred by enthusiasts, 3-speed automatic transmission, slower and less fun. At the time, 174 horsepower wasn't bad, especially in a coupe weighing about 3,000 pounds. 60 miles per hour could be achieved in 7.5 to 8 seconds, and the top speed hovered around 135 miles per hour. Not exactly muscle car territory, but faster than many rivals in the mid-80s compact coupe class. Still, torque steer, turbo lag, and the front-wheel drive layout meant, despite its roots in the economy-focused K-car family, the Shelby Z received a meaningful suspension upgrade: stiffer springs and gas-charged shocks, larger anti-roll bars, 4-wheel disc brakes, rare for the class, performance tires on wider wheels. The result was tight, flat cornering and a surprisingly composed ride for a front-wheel drive car of its era. It could outhandle many similarly priced coupes, though it never fully escaped its understeering nature. This was no track monster, but it offered a fun backroad experience, as long as you kept expectations in check. 5. Interior: 1980s. Digital flash meets budget realities. Inside, the Shelby Z felt both sporty and budget-conscious. Bolstered bucket seats with Shelby logos. Optionally digital dashboard, very 80s. Tilt wheel, cruise control, and power windows. Optional premium sound system. Tacky plastic trim and questionable ergonomics. It gave drivers the illusion of cockpit-like sportiness, but underneath it all was an economy car cabin. Quality was hit or miss, and build materials were often brittle or cheap-feeling, a common Chrysler flaw at the time. 6. Market position and competition. The Shelby Z aimed to compete with Ford Mustang GT, Toyota Celica GTS, Volkswagen Scirocco 16V, Nissan 200SX Turbo. While the Shelby Z offered good horsepower for the price and an impressive feature list, it lacked the refinement of the imports and the cult-like following of the Mustang. Buyers who loved the Shelby name and wanted a modern turbo car were intrigued, but most performance purists still saw it as a pretender wearing a famous badge. The MN12 platform delivered on its promise of a refined ride and confident handling, fully independent rear suspension, electronic adjustable shock absorbers, ARC, automatic ride control, speed-sensitive steering, wider track and longer wheelbase than its predecessor. This gave the Thunderbird SC genuinely impressive handling, far better than most American coupes at the time. However, there were major trade-offs. The car weighed over 3,800 pounds, far more than intended. The IRS system and tech-heavy features added cost and complexity. Despite engineering excellence, the car felt heavy and underpowered at launch. Ford's attempt to build a driver's personal luxury coupe created a machine that was too sophisticated for its own good, especially in an era of tightening budgets and cost-cutting. The 4 was interior and features, tech-focused yet flawed. Inside, the Thunderbird SC was loaded with features aimed at premium buyers. Power everything, windows, mirrors, seats, multi-function digital trip computer, premium audio systems, optional moonroof and leather, supportive sports seats with SC embroidery. Yet the early build quality was inconsistent. Interior plastics were prone to rattling. Electronic glitches with the ARC suspension and trip computer were common. Build tolerances were below expectations for a car in its price range. These flaws were especially frustrating, given that Ford had promised a BMW fighting GT coupe, but early buyers were met with dealer visits and warranty headaches. In the early 90s, Ford made several changes to address early SC shortcomings, reinforced head gaskets and better coolant flow in the engine. Slight bump in power to 230 horsepower by 1994. Improvements to electronic ride control and interior trim, cosmetic updates to match modern trends. Still, by mid-decade, the Thunderbird SC was overshadowed by simpler and cheaper competitors like the Mustang GT and incoming imports. It was discontinued after 1995. The Thunderbird SC was a bold experiment at a time when most American coupes were moving toward simplicity. It proved that Ford still cared about engineering excellence, even if it didn't always get it right the first time. The 1989 SC in particular showed that Ford could build a coupe that handled as well as a European car. Supercharging was viable for mainstream performance. IRS could be mass-produced at scale in the US, but its flaws were hard to ignore. In its early form, the SC was a car of big ambitions and mixed results, undercooked at launch and too complicated for its own good. The 1989 Ford Thunderbird Super Coupe was a product of ambition, engineering passion, and ultimately, early execution failure. It had the ingredients to be a performance legend, a sleek body, independent suspension, and supercharged power. But the launch was marred by weight issues, reliability gremlins, and an identity crisis between luxury and sport. Though later versions would polish the formula, the early concept and release of the SC serve as a cautionary tale. As the 1980s drew to a close, Ford sought to redefine its identity in the performance and personal luxury segments. The Fox body Mustang was aging. The classic big coupes of the 70s were long gone, and buyers were shifting expectations towards smoother, tech-laden, yet still exciting cars. Ford's answer? The 1989 Ford Thunderbird Super Coupe, SC, a sleek, aerodynamic rear-wheel drive personal coupe powered by a supercharged V6. It was ambitious, packed with technology, and aimed squarely at buyers looking for both performance and refinement. But behind the scenes, the development of the Thunderbird SC was riddled with problems. From weight issues and cost overruns to early reliability troubles, the SC's arrival was far from smooth. Though it would earn praise later on, The late 80s concept and launch phase left Ford scrambling to fix a car that was over-designed and underdeveloped. The 1989 Thunderbird was all new, riding on the MN12 platform, a major engineering project intended to bring European-style sophistication to American coupes. It featured independent rear suspension, IRS, which rare for American cars at the time, a longer, wider chassis with a lower center of gravity, extensive use of wind tunnel testing for aerodynamics, a sleek cab-forward profile with flush glass and integrated bumpers. Ford poured over $1 billion into developing the MN12, a huge sum for the era. The Super Coupe was meant to be the platform's halo car, showcasing its engineering depth. 2. Powertrain. Supercharged complexity. The centerpiece of the SC was its supercharged 3.8-liter S6 V6 intended to offer V8 torque with improved efficiency. Engine specs, as released in 1989, 3.8-liter OHV V6 with Eaton M90 supercharger, 210 horsepower and 315 pound-feet of torque, intercooled forced induction, available with a 5-speed manual or 4-speed automatic. This made the SC one of the most powerful American coupes of the time, even rivaling the Mustang GT in torque. But early development and testing exposed major issues. Overheating problems in high-load conditions, fragile head gaskets, especially in prototypes, poor throttle response and supercharger whine that needed tuning, a tightly packaged engine bay that complicated maintenance. Ford engineers pushed hard to meet performance targets, but the added complexity of the supercharger and intercooler system resulted in reliability compromises even before the car hit showrooms.